Good day, CrimeTalk aficionados. We have a great show for you today. First, Chris Watts finally states what we already knew, why he killed Shannan. A decision on whether charges are going to be dismissed against Karen Reed. The death penalty scared a defendant nearly to death. The contract correctional officers, they need to be a little better screened down there in Georgia. And then our dumb criminal of the day. Let's talk about it.
All right, lawyer.
Good day, everyone. My name is Scott Reich, and this is Crime Talk. You know the drill. Subscribe if you haven't, like if you do, leave me a comment below, hit that little bell for notifications, and remember you can listen to us on any of your favorite podcasting apps as well. All right, I don't know about you, but it has been a long week, a very long week. But it is Friday. We made it. So let's go ahead and open the record for August 23rd, 2024. And first on the docket, Chris Watts finally tells us why he killed his wife, Shannan. But we already knew that, right? That's right. Chris Watts continues to blame everyone but himself for the decision to murder his wife and two young girls back in August of 2018. Now, some letters from Chris Watts have been revealed, and he labeled his then pregnant wife as a control freak and claimed that he sought refuge with his mistress, who was everything my wife wasn't. So these handwritten notes are from Watts, who is serving a life sentence in a cell in the Dodge Correctional Institution in Wisconsin. Now, yes, you may say, how did he get to Wisconsin? Well, Colorado, we didn't want him anymore. No, they transferred him out like they do lots of high-profile people and put him in another jurisdiction because we all know the murders were committed just up the road here from the Crime Talk studios. So now, as you know, Watts pled guilty. I know there's still a lot of people that don't believe that Chris Watts is guilty. He pled guilty, ladies and gentlemen. And don't say, oh, Scott, you know people plead guilty all the time. Not to killing your wife and two young children and your unborn child. Yeah, no, people don't do that. Anyway, he admitted to strangling his wife, Shannan, who was 34 at the time, at their home back on August 13th of 2018. He then drove her body to a job site at an oil company where he was working and dumped her in a shallow grave. His daughters, by his own statement, still being alive, Bella, who was 4 at the time, and Celeste, who was only 3 at the time, put him in the truck. And then it gets a little weird, but he basically killed his 2 little girls, ages 4 and 3, shoved them into an oil tank with crude oil so their little bodies could fill up with that crude oil in them as they were basically disposed of like garbage. And we have a video where we literally travel the route that he traveled, and there were so many hospitals, fire departments, banks, businesses, anywhere where he could have stopped and said, kids, get out. But he didn't. We knew that Chris Watts wanted to be with his then mistress, Nicole Kessinger, who claims that she did not know that Chris was married. He thought that he was separated from his wife, but obviously he wanted to be with her. So what's the easy thing to do? That's right, just kill the wife and kids. No one's going to notice, right? Of course they will. Anyway, like I said, he pled guilty and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And these letters were shared by a guy that was in a cell next to Chris Watts, a guy by the name of Dylan Talman. He was a fellow prisoner up there in Wisconsin, and he became friends with Chris Watts. Now, Talman is trying to monetize his brief relationship with Mr. Watts, and I guess it's working. Anyway, these two men apparently became close while in prison, but Watts at some point reneged on his commitment to co-write a prayer book. And then Talman then released a series of 3 books titled The Cell Next Door. Now, according to the letters, Watts confided to Mr. Talman that his marriage to Shannan was unhappy. She was really busy with her job and everything it required, according to Watts, and adding that he often was the primary caregiver to his 2 daughters. because we know that she was quite driven and she was selling stuff, vitamins or whatever it was. And let's face it, this guy was just kind of going through life, just passing it by. And, well, if she's going to have to go out and be the breadwinner, yeah, you're going to have to watch the kids, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, at some point, Watts lost a bunch of weight, thought that women were trying to pay attention to him, and next thing you know, he meets Nicole Kessinger, who he worked with. According to Mr. Watts, she was just everything my wife wasn't like with me. She was just nice and not a control freak. We could make decisions together. Well, Chris Watts obviously made the decision that destroyed his life and that of his wife and 2 young children and unborn child. There's a decision for you, Chris, that you made yourself. Anyway, according to Chris Watts, we knew each other for a while, but we didn't start messing around until 6 weeks before, and he apparently wasn't thinking. That's right. He was thinking with something, but not his head. Anyway, like they said, they worked together and just thought they really had a lot of chemistry, and the temptation was so great. It was forbidden fruit, according to Watts. But Mr. Watts also had some harsh words for Nicole Kessinger, who he told Mr. Talman, the cell next door guy, that she became the death of me. And in one letter previously posted out there, he had called her a Harlow and a Jezebel, and it led to his destruction. So that was the letter dated back in March of 2020. Watts wrote a prayer of confession. The words of a Harlow have brought me low, he wrote. Her flattering speech was like drops of honey that pierced my heart and soul. Little did I know that all her guests were in the chambers of death. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. For all the people who think Chris Watts should try to withdraw his guilty pleas, that's never going to happen. But people have tried. They've thought about it. Hell, we've even got calls about it. But the reality of it is it's not going to happen. And when you say that you confess to it, right, all those statements come in. Even if they did, guess what? His own statements would come back to get him. It's never going to happen. But at least we know he is as despicable as we all thought. Next, the Karen Reed case. Wow, what was going on with the Karen Reed case, right? She going to trial, lasted several weeks, and then the mistrial was declared, and then the defense filed a motion saying, Judge, the jurors reached out to us and they had reached a verdict on a couple of the counts. Not guilty, in fact. And the defense said, we want those judgments of acquittal to be entered, and therefore Miss Karen Reed cannot be retried on those counts where the juries found him guilty. Well, one problem with that. Now, I hate to say who was the guy saying, I don't think that's going to happen. The jury could have said, hey, we've reached a decision on 2, not the remaining counts, and would you like to take a partial verdict? They never did that. The judge never asked, and the judge's order that she issued basically stated they made it sound like they had been unable to reach a decision on any of the counts, and so it doesn't really matter. So needless to say, I hate to say that I was the guy that said I don't think she was going to get any relief, and you should have seen some of the comments in the comment section. Scott, you're an idiot. You don't know anything about the laws of Massachusetts. There's a case where they did this once, and by God, it should happen again. And I said, no, I don't think it will. I don't think it will. I think she's going to go to trial on all of the original counts unless the prosecution chooses to do otherwise. Boy, did I get beat up. Anyway, the judge ruled that Karen Reed can be retried for murder and leaving the scene of the crime scene in the death of her Boston police officer boyfriend, completely dismissing arguments that jurors told lawyers after the mistrial that they had unanimously agreed she was not guilty on 2 charges. So her, like I said, her 2-month trial ended in July when jurors declared they were hopelessly deadlocked, and the judge declared a mistrial after the defense had previously asked for a mistrial at least twice. And that was after the 5th day of the deliberations. The judge's decision came out today, and it means the case can now move forward to that new trial date of January 27th of 2025. Now, as you may recall, the prosecutors, if you're unfamiliar with the case, alleged that Miss Reed, a former professor at Bentley College, and O'Keefe, a member of the Boston Police Department, had been drinking heavily before she dropped him off at a party at the home of Brian Albert, a fellow Boston police officer. They said that the prosecution alleged that Miss Reed hit Officer O'Neill with her SUV before driving away. The autopsy found that O'Keefe died of hypothermia and blunt force trauma. Well, the defense portrayed Reed as the victim in this particular case, arguing that O'Keefe was actually killed inside Albert's home and then dragged outside to frame Karen Reed. They argued that investigators focused on Miss Reed from the beginning, and because she was a convenient outsider who saved them from having to actually consider law enforcement officers as being the true murderers. Anyway, after the mistrial, Reed's lawyers presented evidence that 4 jurors had said they were actually deadlocked on only a third count of manslaughter, and that inside the jury room, they had unanimously agreed that Miss Reed was innocent of the second-degree murder and leaving the scene of a deadly accident. One juror even told the attorneys that no one thought she hit him on purpose or even thought that she hit him on purpose. Her lawyers also argued that the judge abruptly announced the mistrial in court without first asking each juror to confirm their conclusion about each count. And Reed's attorneys had asked the judge to consider summoning back all the jurors to the courtroom and questioning them. But the judge said, no, the jurors didn't tell the court during their deliberations that they had reached a verdict on any of the counts at all. And where there was no verdict announced in open court, here, retrial of the defendant does not violate the principles of double jeopardy, the judge noted in her order. Let the trial begin. Now, prosecutors had previously urged the judge to dismiss what they called as basically frivolous and sensational post-trial claims by the defense based upon nothing but hearsay, conjecture, and legally inappropriate reliance as to the substance of the jury deliberations. Who made that argument even before the prosecution? I think they were watching CrimeTalk. And listen, I didn't even say I told you so, did I? I didn't. I just said who said this is what was going to happen. Do you maybe think, maybe just a little bit, maybe Scott knows a little bit about what he's talking about, just a wee bit? Anyway, the death penalty, it nearly scared a Tennessee man to death. That's right, the Tennessee man that was convicted of raping, torturing, and killing a woman and his girlfriend has been sentenced to death. A jury determined earlier this week. Now, Sean Finnegan seems like a real nice guy, doesn't he? No, he doesn't. Well, he nearly turned white as a ghost in the courtroom as the judge delivered the verdict, death by lethal injection. Now, he was a little wide-eyed. He fussed with his little long, greasy hair there, but he remained silent as he has been throughout the entire case. Anyway, Mr. Finnegan was found guilty of killing Jennifer Gale Paxton with his girlfriend Rebecca Dishman back in 2019 after her battered and mutilated body was discovered in a freezer at their Oak Ridge home. Her body was kept in the freezer for roughly 8 months, during which time Finnegan would view her corpse for sexual pleasure, according to the police. Now, Finnegan had hidden the body underneath his bed before police searched the residence back in 2020, and the couple lured Paxton, who lived in a nearby homeless camp, into their home by offering her a place to stay. But instead, she was held against her will and beaten with a baseball bat, according to prosecutors' theory of the case. She was restrained with a dog collar, chained to a bed, and had her arms bound with zip ties, according to court records. Ms. Paxton was also repeatedly raped and denied food and medical care before she was choked and left to die in the freezer. Part of one of her breasts and her nose were actually cut off, according to the police. Now, Dishman pled guilty to murder last year, that's the girlfriend, after agreeing to testify against Mr. Finnegan, the not-so-nice boyfriend. Mr. Finnegan will be transferred to the state penitentiary in Nashville for execution by lethal injection. Now, the district attorney noted that it's a heavy decision to seek to put somebody to death, but in this particular case, he deserved it. Like I said, Mr. Finnegan was convicted on 11 counts on Monday, including criminally negligent homicide, first-degree felony murder during the perpetration of an attempt to perpetrate aggravated rape, abuse of a corpse, and conspiracy to commit aggravated rape. Mr. Finnegan will be back in court on November 7th for a hearing regarding his non-capital convictions, where I'm sure he'll receive the ultimate maximum sentence that he can. Anyway, the only time Mr. Finnegan has ever expressed any emotion during the entire trial was when his brother's ex-wife testified on his behalf and detailed how he was the victim of physical and sexual abuse as a child. Wow, and I guess the jury didn't think that was a big enough mitigating factor. Anyway, there are now 46 people on Tennessee's death row, but the governor, Bill Lee, paused executions back in 2022 to await the results of an independent investigation into the state's lethal injection methods. That is a very horrific crime that took place. I get it. You know, you're entitled to a death sentence. You're not entitled to a perfect death sentence. Just like you're not entitled to a perfect trial, but you're entitled to a fair trial. Obviously, Mr. Finnegan will more likely be on death row for years, if not decades and decades to come. So sometimes you wonder, is it really worth it? I don't know. But sometimes there's just people that may not be redeemable. I know some people may not like that, but sometimes you have to really think about it. Like, really, we're going to spend the next 30, 40 years spending some $50,000 to house somebody in the Department of Corrections? I mean, I know it's a hot topic. Some people, not morally correct. Why should the state take people's lives? But the Constitution says you can be put to death as long as you're given due process. They can't take your life, liberty, or property without due process of law. As long as you get due process, they can do it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Next, some correctional officers commit some misconduct down in Georgia. Yeah, I think they need to screen these contract correctional officers a little better. So 4 jail security contractors are facing criminal charges in a contraband smuggling conspiracy where it is alleged these contractors took into the jail cell phones, a chicken pot pie, and had sex with an inmate at the Fulton County Jail in Atlanta. Now, Lacuna, Laquna, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Ballard, Regina Harris, and Braisha Tate, and Aniza Silas each face charges of conspiracy and providing prohibited items to an inmate. And this was at the Fulton County Jail there in Georgia. Now, the 4 women were employed by a jail contractor, and they were working on the 6th and 7th floor at the jail. Now, the chief executive officer for the Strategic Security Corporation, the people that hired these 4 people, said that the company is cooperating with law enforcement and going to conduct their own investigation. And the CEO stated that he is both shocked and saddened by the actions of these 4 individuals. And the CEO said, our company has long been committed to upholding the highest standards of integrity, transparency, and ethical conduct. He further stated our employees undergo the most stringent hiring requirements in the industry, including a comprehensive criminal history background check, credit checks, MMPI evaluations, drug screening, character references, and a thorough review of professional work history and educational background. One of the former contract correctional officers, Ms. Ballard, is accused of selling explicit photos and videos to an inmate and of accepting at least 2 payments from 2 different residents for cell phones and cigarettes. Ms. Tate also faces the charges of improper sexual contact. She's accused of having sex at least 3 times with a resident, that's right, an inmate, and bringing in at least 6 cell phones, ladies and gentlemen, so that she could sell them to other inmates. Now, Miss Silas also faces an additional charge of providing an inmate with an unauthorized staff meal. The Fulton County Jails had a lot of problems, and the United States Justice Department was investigating the living conditions, medical and mental health care facilities, and allegations of use of excessive force. The probe was launched last year after allegations surfaced that an inmate died covered in insects and filth. In his justification for the investigation, the Department of Justice also noted that there have been credible allegations made that the Fulton County Jail is structurally unsafe, that prevalent violence has resulted in serious injuries and homicides, and that officers are being prosecuted for using excessive force. The sheriff blames everything on understaffing. They just need more money, even though they just got $300 million to renovate the jail, ladies and gentlemen. It's just never enough money. Never enough money. If we just had more money, we'd be able to do a better job on everything, except hiring people that are going to work in the prison, in the jail. Fulton County Jail wasn't the Department of Corrections. Let's be clear. Contraband in the jail it's seriously wrong. I represented a deputy sheriff years ago who was doing this exact same conduct, and I went in for sentencing, and I explained to the judge why he was a good guy. It was a lapse in judgment. Don't send him to prison. He's a police officer, and he'll be in solitary confinement. He's a safety risk while he's in custody, etc. And the judge, a very good judge who I had a lot of respect for, pulled his microphone over in front of him, made sure he was getting picked up clearly so that everybody can hear it. And he looked at my client, and he looked at me, and he looked at my client again, and he said to the defendant, "You had a badge, and you spit on it." And he then imposed the maximum penalty provided under the statute and sent him off to the Department of Corrections. So it's a problem. I've seen clients go into jail and come out of jail with drug addictions when they did not have one when they went in. The contraband is crazy because literally these drug enterprises and organized crime cartels are literally running their organizations from inside the jail, ladies and gentlemen. And if you can't control the jail, what makes you think you're going to be able to control anything that takes place on the outside? You simply are not going to be able to do it. And finally today, our dumb criminal of the day. That's right. You know it. Another food attack. Why is this so prevalent throughout the entire country? Well, our story today brings us to a 21-year-old woman who is angry that her sister would not share the food that she brought home. Today's dumb criminal involves a 21-year-old woman who is angry with her sister because she wouldn't share the food that her sister brought home. And guess what? She was arrested in a ravioli battery charge. Police say that Nakia Davis got mad at her blood-related sister after the victim did not allow the defendant to have any of the food. Anyway, the upset sister, police allege, retaliated by throwing a plate of raviolis at the sister. And when the police arrived, the victim still had sauce from the raviolis on her. Now, Miss David reportedly admitted to the ravioli tossing, which was witnessed by the victim's boyfriend. Well, guess what? She has been charged with domestic battery because most domestic violence statutes include family members as well. It's not just an intimate partner. Anyway, yes, it is only a misdemeanor charge, and Miss Davis had to spend the night in the jail before being released on her own recognizance. But guess what? She can't go home and she can't talk to her sister because it's a gateway crime, ladies and gentlemen. You start throwing ravioli at your sister for not sharing the food that she and her boyfriend brought home, it's causing problems. Next thing you know, probably going to be chopped up, put in the basement. You just never know where it's going to end. It's a gateway crime, ladies and gentlemen. All right, that's all we have for today. Hope you enjoyed the show. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you here next week. And remember, the Constitution matters.